Finance.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mad Fientist Financial Independence Podcast, the podcast where I get inside the brains of some of the best and brightest in the personal finance space to find out how they achieved financial independence. I'm really excited about today's episode because it's unlike any that I've done before. This one was recorded live back in May at Camp Mustache in the Pacific Northwest. If you're not familiar with Camp Mustache, it's like a weekend conference put on by Mr. Money Mustache readers, and it's about 50 people. They all come to a really cool lodge in the middle of the woods in Washington State and spend the weekend hanging out, talking finances, drinking beer, and roasting marshmallows on the campfire. And it's a really good time. But on the last day of Camp Mustache, it's usually a time when Pete, aka Mr. Money Mustache, takes questions from the audience, and we sit around and he answers everybody's questions. So I asked if I could hijack that session this year and sort of do a panel discussion where the audience members ask a bunch of questions and we record it as a podcast and record all the answers. It was a lot of fun to do, and there's some incredible stuff that comes out of it. So here it is. It's a panel discussion from Camp Mustache with Mr. Money Mustache, Paula Pant from Afford Anything, Doug Nordman from The Military Guide, and me, the Mad Fientist. All right, welcome, Camp Mustache. Nice. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to get two old podcast guests back on the show. My first ever interview is sitting to my right, the main man himself, Mr. Money Mustache.
Thank you, Mr. Fientist.
Welcome back. It's been over 4 years since we last formally chatted.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'll be more polished this time.
You were great last time. And then we're moving on to my fourth podcast guest ever, which is still way back then, I think probably in 2012. Paula Pant from AffordAnything.com.
Oh, thank you. I can't believe it's been 4 years.
And finally on the panel, we have Doug Nordman, a.k.a. Nords from The Military Guides. And he's not yet been on the show yet, but I just locked him down this morning for a future interview. So welcome, Doug.
I'm just happy to be here.
So yeah, we are sitting here in a beautiful lodge in the Pacific Northwest. There's literally not a cloud in the sky. We've just had a really fun, intense weekend. You can probably tell that I'm almost losing my voice, so hopefully it holds out. But lots of great chat, and this is usually what rounds off the camp. Is usually everyone asks Pete a lot of questions, but I asked if I could record everything, and then we squeezed up here too. So yeah, we're just going to kick off with some questions from the audience, and they may be directed at one of us, all of us, but and it's all going to be interesting. So for the first question.
Hi, I'm Kevin from Redmond, Washington. And my question for the panel is, what is your top recommendation for people who are close to FI?
All right, so this is so I'll hand over to the stash since he's the guest of honor here.
I think mine would be, it depends on what your issues are, but most people seem to have an issue of being afraid to quit, and they often get one more year syndrome, or am I really going to be okay? And after I give up this fire hose of cash from my real job. So for people like that, it is to just set an arbitrary date, which might be this afternoon, and just do it. And then, because the sooner you get into the new exciting experiences of like this new life, that's when the growth resumes. And that's the whole point of retiring early and starting new adventures, is getting the growth. So delaying the growth is often a problem, and people make that happen for 5 years or more past when they could have been out there doing new stuff.
I'd say my top recommendation is to think about what you're moving into, because there's moving out of something, whether that's a job or whatever is the current thing in your life that you want to escape or leave. But then there's also moving into something that really excites you. So focus on not on the escape, but on the new opportunity.
Start making that list of what you're going to do all day, because it's going to be a long list and you're not going to get half of it done.
Yeah, it's very similar to what I was thinking. Think of those big projects that you want to do, and get a start so that when you lead into early retirement, you have some momentum. I still haven't
gone there yet, so this is all my thinking. But when I took 3 months off at the beginning of last year, I had plans to do all these great things. And, Parkinson's law says, whatever amount of time you have to do something, that's how long it'll take. So I had 3 months to do stuff, and that's how long it took. And I really didn't get stuff done I wanted to. So I think rather than having a big daunting start to something new, once you have all the time in the world, I think it would probably be more beneficial to start that hard thing now and have some momentum going into joblessness. But, yeah, we'll see if that works out, but that's what I would suggest probably. Question number 2.
This is for anybody who would like to answer. What words would you share with someone new to mustachianism to keep them motivated on their financial independence journey?
Humans suck at estimating exponential growth. And so you're going to start this journey, and a year later, you're going to be 1% of the way along the journey. A year after that, you'll be 2% of the way along the journey. And it seems like it's going to take forever to finish the journey. However, 10 to 15 years into it, one day you're going to look at your finances and realize that you've made tremendous progress over the last year. It's almost as if you have an extra person in a household with a separate salary, and they're almost earning as much as you. A couple of years later, that investment growth is going to be getting more than you're earning at your current job. And that's when you realize that you're just about financially independent. So stick with those first numbers of years, whether that's 5, 10, or 20 years, because the exponential power of compounding is growing all that way. You just won't appreciate it until the final few years.
The main thing that I would emphasize is that, like, a core part of my philosophy has always been, you can afford anything, but not everything. And every dollar that you spend is a trade-off against something else. And I think that a lot of people, if you're looking at one purchase in isolation, it's very easy to justify that particular purchase. But if you think of it as a trade-off, either against another purchase or against your time, then that contextualizes it a little bit more. And then it doesn't feel like deprivation. It just feels like, oh, I'm just choosing X instead of Y, even if, regardless of what that X is, whether it's travel or just having more time to spend with your family and friends, whatever that is, that's more important to you than this shiny thing.
I think if you're not sure what you're going to start with, it might be good to start with kind of a philosophy of life and read some stuff or listen to some audiobooks or whatever about just kind of ancient principles that were around before we became this fancy society that we are right now. So things like stoicism and quest for having a reason to be alive. And basically what it boils down to is enjoying hardship and practicing a voluntary hardship in every day. For example, just having a bit less clothes than you might normally wear outside, or just all these other things. So finding ways to trick yourself into being challenged each day. That's kind of a way to immediately make your life become more meaningful. And even if you're still very at the beginning of getting your finances in order, having this as a framework suddenly makes everything else work better. And then suddenly you can earn more money and you can spend less money because you're engaged in this quest to make your life better, which happens to involve doing difficult stuff. And most people, we're trained in this country to avoid difficult stuff. And so that's the first thing I think you got to get rid of if you want to get anywhere that's different from the other people. I just made that up.
That's awesome. So you said something about the meaning of life, and that's an interesting challenge that's been coming into my life recently. And, it's like a job easily distracts you for X number of years, and then maybe children distract you for another years. And you really don't have to answer that fundamental question, like, what's the point of me, or what's the point of all of this? But as someone who doesn't have kids and may not have kids, and who doesn't have a job as of August 1st, any recommendation from anyone on the panel that what do you do to work towards, a meaningful life? Anyone want to take that one?
I recommend buying a longboard and surfing, and after a while, you'll find your meaning.
I like Nord's answer, even though I don't surf. It's kind of like, it's just a fulfilling passion of something that's difficult and cool, and you can get better at it over time. And so for me, that's carpentry is my longboard and waves. And that can, that just sticks with me through my whole life. And that's like everything else is a framework around that, this core passion. So you got to do something with your days. For our next question.
My name's David Fox. I'm from Colorado. So I had a question, maybe if you guys could kind of rewind in your minds to when you were first starting your FI journey. So whether you were like 7 years old, like Pete, or I don't know, maybe you guys were like in your early 20s or decided that you just hated your job or wanted to do something else. And maybe 3 or so years into your FI savings, if you had any doubts or any troubles along the way, or maybe you're working a job that you don't like that can pay you to a point where you have FI, or maybe you're just not finding other people who identify with the way you're thinking. Maybe you could share like an anecdote or some advice that kind of kept you on that path, or a step that you took to kind of keep you going. I'd be curious to hear that.
Well, I know for me personally, I don't think it was motivation to keep pursuing FI. It was more, I went the opposite way and went so hardcore that I made myself really unhappy during the process, because I just didn't want to do anything that involved spending money, because I just wanted to get there as soon as possible. So that's the big recommendation I would say not to do. So I'm going to pass to someone else as far as what your specific question was, but I figured I'd chime in before and just make that point. Focus on the power you're getting along the way with all that money that you're saving up, and use that power to make your life a lot better along the way. And don't sacrifice happiness for that final number in the bank, because $1 extra in your bank account's not going to really make you any happier. So work on happiness while you're pursuing it. But anyone want to take that question from David?
I have something in my mind for that. So for me, that point was maybe when I'm like 27 or 28 years old, and I'd been working in engineering for, I don't know, like close to 10 years, not 8 to 10 years, depending where you count the start date. And so I was getting a little tired, especially with this big company I worked at. So I found I had to sort of practice gratitude a little bit, like remind myself how great this job was compared to like working in a gas station like I did when I was 15. And remind myself that I was still in like Boulder, Colorado, and doing all this great stuff. And at the end of each work day, I worked on the 4th floor of this 4-story building. And I remember I was kind of like jumping down the stairs at the end of each work day on my way zigzagging down to where I parked my bike. And I remember thinking, okay, that's another $400 or whatever, which is another, and I would calculate how many more weeks of retirement, or weeks closer I had pulled in my retirement, because by that time, $400 earned that day, I wasn't going to be spent until 20 years in the future. So it would have compounded to like thousands of dollars. So anyway, I was like, yeah, I just subtracted another 39 days from my work life. And so like little mental games like that just made it feel like I'd accomplished a lot in one boring day. And then I was also reminded that the job was not that bad. And yeah, it passed pretty quickly. And so I was happy. And then when I quit, it was just like a really, really guilt-free, wonderful experience, because I was like, I did not miss that job at all. The next day I woke up, and that was the last I'd ever thought about going into the office.
Excellent. Nords, how was it when you were coming about with this? Because I'm not sure there was as many pieces of external information that you could, fall back on to help you during your journey. So it'd be interesting. One to shortly tell your story, and then 2, to see how you dealt with that question.
We were doing this with clay tablets and styluses. And then the number 0 was invented. The early days, all I knew to do was to save. I knew you had to save a certain amount of money, and I had no idea what I was saving it for. I just knew that I needed to save a certain amount of money. And maybe for your initial journey towards financial independence, you're going to start getting out of debt. Maybe you're just going to save because you know you're going to have some new expense coming up and you're saving for that. But one day you'll figure out what you want to spend your money on, or you'll track your spending and figure out what you're wasting your money on, and then you'll just start chipping away at that waste until you've boosted up your savings rate. But the thing that keeps you going is the motivation to make your life better. And you've got to be careful with the line between frugality and deprivation. I tell my military readers, that's easy. You spent most of your time in the military in deprivation. You know exactly where that line is. And in a civilian side, you're looking at frugality, but if you're not having fun, if you're not feeling challenged and fulfilled and enjoying what you're doing and making that struggle toward financial independence, then you're probably into deprivation. That's the time when you take a step back, try not to save so much, or try to raise your income and try to enjoy life a little bit more so that you feel revitalized, you feel re-energized, you feel like you can make that journey to the rest of the way to financial independence. My regret in my military career is that when I got to the 12-year point out of 20, my career path had stalled. I didn't know it, but I just had my final promotion. We also started a family. We had a whole new list of priorities that had little or nothing to do with career. And so at that point, I should have left active duty and gone into the reserves. The reserves or National Guard is 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year of military. Just enough camaraderie, not enough money, much better quality of life. If I had done that, then things would have worked out about the same. We would have saved about the same amount of money. We would have reached financial independence a couple of years later with a much better quality of life in between. And we would have gotten the same amount of money at age 60 that I'm probably going to be getting around age 60 with my savings, and we would have had a little less in our savings by the time we reached age 60 and that pension kicked in. Instead, I grimly clenched my jaw and gutted it out for 8 more years. By the time I got to the 18, 19, 20-year point, it wasn't so bad, but from 12 to 17 years, you could definitely see in my medical record the stress, the mental and physical effects of trying to make it all the way there while you were still in a state of deprivation. So if you find yourself in that state of deprivation, don't just gut it out and say, God, only 10 more years, I'm going to stay the course and keep on it. Instead, back off a little bit, take life a little better, maybe spend a little more money on yourself, and delay your plans a year or two. You'll thank yourself later.
And yeah, I'm just going to chime in on that deprivation thing. If you are at that stage like I was, the good news is that when you realize that and try to come out of it, by then you've optimized things so much because you likely optimized all your spending before you started depriving yourself of things you liked. So when you come out of that and you start spending more freely, like I did last year when I didn't expect to have a salary, but was still working, and I started spending completely freely. It felt like I was making it rain all the time or something, and it really didn't move the needle at all, because all the other ingrained habits of being frugal were still there. And by then I'd optimized so many things. So then when I stopped depriving myself, it really wasn't that much, but it felt like it was the best thing ever. And I was able to do anything. Paula, do you want to jump in with that question?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my story's a little bit different because my focus was just building passive income. Before I ever learned about FI, I learned about self-employment and thought, because I didn't know about FI, I thought that was the goal. And so I became self-employed. And then in order to give myself some insurance against ever needing to go back into employment, like W-2 employment, I started buying rental properties thinking that'll just give me a little bit of a safety net. And so it was after I started doing that, I was just kept doing it basically. And I was like, hey, wait a second. If I just continue to do this, eventually this rental income will be enough that I won't even need to be self-employed if I don't want to be. So I guess my story is different in that FI wasn't a goal. Just avoiding employment was a goal. and then that, came about through, A came about through B. But in terms of frugality and versus deprivation, that's something that we also struggled with a lot. When I started working, my first job out of college, I made $21,000 a year. And it felt like a lot because in college, I made about $1,000 a month, and I had to, out of necessity, support myself on that. And so relative to that, $21K a year felt like a lot of money, and so I guess my point is just that deprivation is very much a relative state of mind. And if you constantly, instead of anchoring yourself to what fancy people are doing, if you anchor yourself to either the way that you lived when you were younger out of necessity, or maybe the way that you see some friend live, or just the way that people in other countries or in very, very low income neighborhoods in the United States live. If you anchor yourself to those points, you see that what what might feel like deprivation is actually still pretty awesome,
Definitely recommend anyone who's struggling with spending to go spend some time abroad. And yeah, you'll quickly see how luxurious your life in America is.
Brandon from Denver. I've kind of learned while I'm here that there's a lot of different types of cultures online, even with very similar messages. So what thoughts do you have on sort of guiding culture on your forum with either yourself or with moderators to kind of reach the audience that you want and the culture that you want to have, or not?
I think we'll go to Pete for this one because he's developed definitely the biggest and most impressive culture.
I think there's, for me, like my own little personal situation, there's kind of two different cultures in my online world. There's like this main blog that has people throwing in comments at the end of articles. And then there's a much bigger discussion in this forum section where there's like, tens of thousands of people having extended discussions that last like years. And I basically don't take part in that other one because it's too big. I don't want to get sucked into it. So basically it self-manages with the amazing godlike guidance of Joe, who is standing here, and other people. And both cultures are great, but that culture is more of like a community, and people get to know each other and they exchange things back and forth. And I think Joe has set up sort of a set of rules that people have to follow, and they're just loosely enforced. And it gradually, as the body of discussions grows, it serves as a model for other people. And the rules are like kind of be excellent to each other and party on, dude. And that's different from the main blog, which is more like just quick, casual stuff. There's not really an opportunity to talk back and forth. So I have different type of rules for that. And for me, it's only say things that are with the goal of sharing information, helping or entertaining other people. There's no sense just reading a comment that's a complaint. And also respect what other people have said, in the sense that you should read through other things instead of just asking the same question because you're too lazy to read what everybody else has written before you. So for me, I get to be more of like just a dictator, and I use the comments section as a chance to publish people's helpful comments, which is very different because, in that case, like censorship is sort of appropriate to avoid them getting just like a big zoo, like the comments you would get on a CNN article. So those are the two differences. But in both cases, we're shooting for positivity as being the guide that everybody should follow. And as soon as people see other people being positive, it seems to be self-reinforcing. And I'll notice, like in other websites, that without dictators censoring them, it'll sometimes start out positive, and then a few people will say something negative, and it'll just be like a race to the bottom of like complaint fest. Like, oh yeah, I guess we're complaining now. Well, I've got some complaints. And it's neat because that works in real life too. If you are kind of the I don't accept complaints person, or at least I gently guide conversations away from complaints, then your real life interactions can be a lot more fun too. So that's maybe a more practical thing, because not everybody has to manage forums on their website, but everybody does have to manage conversations in real life. It's really fun to be, that I never complain and I never nurture other people's complaints in conversations. I try to just gently bring it back to positive. So if you haven't tried that, you should try it. It's pretty neat. Any other answers?
Yeah, I'm lucky in the sense that people tend to find me through Mr. Money Mustache, and then maybe Jim Collins, JL Collins NH, and then they get to me. So it's like my success with the community that I have on my site has been that I've associated with people that I respect, like all of these people on the panel, and like other people like Jim Collins, and other blogs out there that I really enjoy. And then that way the people that do find me usually filter through one of those potentially, and then I get like great people, like pre-screened great people coming my way, because they're for no charge. I know. Yes. So yeah, it's I'm very lucky in that sense, and that was not thought out or anything like that. It was unintentional, but it's been great, and I feel really thankful for that, because it's usually all of everyone I've met at any of these sort of Mr. Money Mustache events have been great. So it's like this style of people, because they they want even more than the blog, and that's the people that eventually would find my blog. So I'm lucky in that sense. So anybody else on the panel?
For yourself, you're going to go find several internet forums and join those and start commenting and find out if those are your people. Earlyretirement.org, Bogleheads, in addition to Mr. Money Mustache, and maybe there's a few other forums on places like Reddit where you can start asking questions and find out who's there and whether they're fun to be with or whether you're just going to quietly move on and try again somewhere else. On your own site, if you build your own site and you're trying to attract a tribe, you can wait for the commenters to show up, and that takes some time. It can take 12 to 18 months before you build a large community through comments on your blog. You can also go to the easy answer, the faster answer, which is build a Facebook group or join other Facebook groups. You don't own that comment. You're at the mercy of Facebook, and you're going to have to deal with the Facebook constrictions on how you do this. But you can build a community a little faster through Facebook to get more people and more comments. Once you've done that on Facebook at Zuckerberg's expense and with the people that are always there anyway, you can decide whether you want to start your own forum on your own site and then build that up.
So I would just say, in terms of online, I agree with Pete. Like, don't let the weirdo into the cocktail party, because then all the awesome people are going to leave. Don't let too much negativity come in, because some people feel bigger by taking other people down. Like crabs in a bucket sort of a thing, where they can't, that's their whole mission, is to take people down. And you just can't let people like that into your life. And by life, I mean, I'm totally missing something here.
Sorry, Pete's pinching me with crab.
Yeah, you just can't let the pinchers into your life.
Great question.
Hey, this is Juan from Colombia.
Hey, Juan.
My question kind of revolves around investing. We're here in the middle of 2016 after a long bull market. And even though I know what the textbook says and what you guys say on your blogs, just keep investing every month a little bit. One cannot help to think or to want to time the market in a way. And, that's kind of an internal struggle that I have sometimes and that I've heard other people here have this weekend. If you can just, give some advice on that, either general or specific, that would be great.
I got a super quick one. So there's different levels of timing the market that are more or less destructive. And sometimes you just need a psychological crutch to feel like you're doing something. So you could be, the destructive way would be I'm just going to sell everything and then just hold it in gold coins under my mattress until it's cheaper again. So that's, really, really unlikely to work, super likely to cause problems. So, and at the same time, you'd feel like you're doing something, but then you'd feel bad when you have no money, 20 years from now. So instead, you could indulge. First of all, you could keep training yourself and just keep reading these books and be disciplined and always just throw every paycheck into the market. That's probably the most winning strategy. But if you really, really can't do that, you could do little stuff stocks are so expensive, I'm just going to pay a little bit of my mortgage off extra. I'm going to start doing $500 extra to my mortgage this month or for the next year. And so you're still creating a win-win situation where you're getting positive returns on this money and you're diversifying a little bit. And you can't really predict the statistics either way. You might get lucky or you might get slightly unlucky, but you're still going to come out ahead and way better than almost everybody else. So the thing I like to think about with investing is you don't have to be anything close to amazing to make it work for you. You just have to keep a net positive over a long period of time. So you kind of should just do, whatever approach, but just don't let yourself become uninvested and don't try to really outsmart the world. So for me, I kind of, I did pay off my house because I felt why keep investing in stocks even though I know it'll probably exceed this mortgage rate in terms of how much it gives me back. But I paid off the house and I've never regretted it. I feel great not having a mortgage payment. And statistically, I would have been better to leave the money in stocks and still have a mortgage now. But it's not a contest for most money. It's just a contest for feeling good about your financial situation and sleeping well. So yeah, I'd say just be easy on yourself while avoiding the most stupid possible decisions.
Yeah, this is something I struggle with as well. Even though I know better, and the math shows that you're better off just having most time in market rather than trying to time the market. One thing that helped me was to set up automated investing. Like obviously my retirement accounts were always automated. My taxable accounts weren't always automated. So then, I'd end up with a ton of cash and I'd be like, I really need to invest this. But then when you have a ton of it, you're like, whoa, it seems really high right now. I'll just wait until one dip, and then it just never works out. So I set up automated investing, and that really helped. But I have a confession. I stopped automated investing because I did some tax loss harvesting earlier this year, and I still haven't started it back up because I can't get around my own stupid brain. So now I have a lot of cash again. So it's something I'm trying to work on too. But I just also want to point out that we could have had this conversation in 2012 and been like, wow, this bull market's crazy, and if you had stopped investing then, you would have been sorry. So you can never tell when the bull market's going to stop. So, that's coming from some guy that's still struggling with it. So take it for what it's worth.
So the way that I've dealt with this is, instead of thinking about like, I'm going to invest less when I feel like the market's high, like flip your mindset into when I feel like the market's low, I'm going to invest like even more. So whatever amount you're currently investing monthly, just keep doing that. And then when you see a dip, be like, okay, sweet. What is something like I would have spent some money on just something ridiculous, but instead I'm going to like take that and like invest that now at the dip. And so by like taking that approach, you end up investing more money than you otherwise would have, because like you're just taking money that you would have otherwise spent at a restaurant or on clothes or on like, I don't know, a fancy cat groomer or whatever, And like now that is like the way that you like enjoy timing the market, and it's just bonus investments.
I've spent 35 years proving this, and you can share from my wisdom and my mistakes. And the first wisdom is you can't control the market. You can't influence it. You can't have any effect over it. The only things you can do is control your reaction, control your responses, and try to control how you feel. One of the ways to do that is to read all you can about the market. I recommend history books. The more you read about the history of the stock market, the more you'll feel that today's volatility is very mild compared to what it used to be. And you'll get an appreciation for how, no matter how bad the markets have gotten, the American economy has continued to rise, gotten stronger, given everybody more wealth, raised the standard of living. If you invest in the long-term benefits, the long-term potential of some economy like that, then despite all the volatility, you'll still come out ahead 20 years from now. And remember, humans suck at appreciating that exponential growth. You have to stick around for 20 years to appreciate how much things improve. If you find out that no matter how much you read, how much you study, that you still can't live with the way the markets behave, then don't invest in the markets. Go find something else like real estate. Go find out a way to start your own business and start your own income producing way of bringing in money. Maybe it'll be passive income from rental real estate. Maybe it'll be income from a job. I know a hedge fund manager who, at the peak of his prowess as a hedge fund manager, sold out. And he took a big pile of cash and really enjoyed life. 20 years later, he realized what he really should have done is he should have hired a crew of hedge fund managers and paid them well, compensated them well for doing it, while he retained a small interest in that hedge fund. 10, 15, 20% of the profits would go to him. That's about as passive as your income can get. He didn't have to care about the stock market. He just had to care about how well his hedge fund guys were doing their job.
And Nord's mentioned the history of the stock market, and I actually have my computer here, and I save some interesting quotes anytime I come across them. And this just shows like how overwhelming the upward trend in the market actually is. Starting 65 years ago, you've had a new high over 11,000 times. 1,100 times, sorry, geez. Which is about once every 15 days the market's been opened. So you're hitting new highs about once every 15 days. And if you pick any month of any year, it turns out you have a 75% chance of the market being higher 1 year later. So 3 out of 4 times this month next year is going to be higher. So the overwhelming trend is up, and this could be the lowest the stock market ever gets, but nobody ever knows. So just keep the faith. Let's hear it for one.
Hi, I'm Isabel from San Francisco. This is more of a lighthearted question, but what is your biggest splurge?
My biggest splurge is my relentless insistence on fancy houses, and every single detail has to be, in my view, fancy. So like, for example, I could not live with a white dishwasher or a white microwave. It has to be silver in color. And I would never be satisfied in the long run with like a plastic shower pan. It has to be finely installed tiles with like just the right grout and stuff. So yeah, I'm really kind of a sucker for the physical environment that I spend most of my time in. And even though it's like, I keep trying to put it in the human history context, and like it's very, I'm wedging myself into a narrow slice of like only this tiny fraction I've ever experienced living in a house like that, but I just keep indulging it anyway. And and I'm going to keep doing it.
Mine is definitely like fancy beers and fancy like scotches over in Scotland and things. Like fancy food is also one of my splurges, but I don't really consider that a splurge because it's nourishing and I at least feel like it's essential. Whereas alcohol was completely counterproductive for health, and it's good for socialness. Sorry? Some of you may feel different. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's good for social situations. I was probably a lot more outgoing this weekend, thanks to all the beer. But yeah, since it doesn't really contribute to a good, healthy lifestyle, I consider that my biggest splurge.
For me, it's travel, and it's a splurge, but it's like also a very intentional, like very deliberate priority in my life, because I've learned it's been a big part of like what shaped me and what's made me who I am. And I'll do it with stay in Airbnb places or stay in like hostels or guest houses, because it's not about like fancy accommodation. It's just about meeting people and experiencing the place. But but I mean, my carbon footprint is massive, unfortunately, and I try to I admit it, and I travel a lot, and I spend a lot of my money and my time and my like energy there. And I'm just going to keep doing it.
Surf wax. Any questions? I feel like I'm relentlessly optimizing my life when I'm at home. I have a photovoltaic array that I enjoyed building solar panels and a solar water heater, and yet that's a hobby that clearly pays for itself. And I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed putting it together, and now I enjoy the benefits of having done that. But Paula's already mentioned it. One of my splurges is travel. The other one of my splurges is spending excessively when we're traveling. And an example of that is FinCon. I know I'm going to FinCon once a year. I know it's only going to last for a certain amount of time. No matter how hard I work at it, I probably can't spend an entire year's investment income at FinCon. Not for lack of trying, but I go to FinCon and I don't worry about the money I'm spending on the hotel room. I don't worry about the money I'm spending on whatever I see going on around FinCon or whatever travel we do around FinCon. I know that's a limited time of the year. It's okay to splurge. I'm not making that a daily habit, and I'm not making that a daily splurge that's out of control.
Great question. Round of applause.
Hi, I'm Janet from Seattle. I think as a lot of us are working toward FI, we're really focused on the financial parts of it, and maybe sometimes get a little bit too obsessed about that. But it seems like a lot of people's experience is once you get there, that's not really such a big issue. So I'm wondering, for the four of you, what has been the biggest challenge about reaching financial independence, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, we can do it in order again. For me, it's true. The money part, it just completely faded away like pretty quickly. So yeah, we don't think about money or investments or anything. It's more about trying to make sure you're getting the most happiness out of each day. And for me, because I can be a bit spaghetti scatterbrained, it's trying to get more strategic about long-term life stuff so that I really feel like I'm living a worthwhile life and not just getting too caught up in little activities that just trivial pursuits of reading stuff that I don't really get enjoyment out of. So it's more like day-to-day time management. That's my big thing. I'm really, really happy with my family situation already and parenting situation and health. So certainly nothing to complain about, but there's definitely some days at the end of the day where I'm like, I just wasted this whole day of retirement in a beautiful location. So that's a thing I'm working on, trying to get those days down to zero.
I've already mentioned the whole meaning of life question that's been popping up every once in a while, but I haven't stopped working, so maybe things will change after that. But I've also only other thing since getting to this stage has been like a little bit of like guilt or like, why am I so lucky that this has happened, and how did I become so fortunate to get in this sort of situation when a lot of my colleagues and friends and family aren't, and they're just as talented and hardworking as I am. So
they're not. You're just really awesome.
that is going to be the title of this episode from the Mr. Money Mustache quote. So yeah, those are the two major things that I've struggled with that I didn't really expect to happen, but they're definitely manageable, which is great. So,
for me, I think it's knowing when to stop, with regard to like any kind of money-making pursuit. Because, and again, my story is a little different because I was self-employed. And so once I became FI, then I didn't have a job to quit, I just had a smattering of clients. And slowly I had the option of like letting go of some client that I didn't like. So instead of like having one very defined moment where I'm like, boss, I quit, it's more like, okay, I've got like a dozen different clients and maybe I'll let go of this one and let go of this one and let go of this one. But then it's like playing whack-a-mole, right? Like you let go of a couple of clients and then these new ones pop up and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Sure, I'll take that. And I've got this space in my schedule now. So sure, I'll take that one and sure, I'll take that one. And then before you know it, you're like working 60-hour weeks and you're not really enjoying it. And you're like, why the F am I doing this? I don't even need the money anyway. And then you like, fire a bunch of clients again and then a bunch more pop up. And so that's been like the struggle for me is like developing those boundaries and being able to say like, wait a minute. I guess it's kind of similar it's in a different vein, but it's similar to what Pete was talking about, like a time management and setting priorities and like really thinking about how you want to spend your days and what's important. And it's even harder when there's like money involved and like financial opportunity cost involved because, and this also goes back to the one more year syndrome. It's the one more client syndrome or the one more project syndrome. And that is like just the eternal thing that I've had to fight.
The two pieces of advice I have are don't recreate your old environment. You're financially independent now. You don't have to go back there. The other one is forget about who you were and discover who you are. And that's particularly applicable to military retirees and veterans. Maybe you want to recreate some of that because you miss the camaraderie, you miss the mission, you miss the people you used to work with, you miss that sense of accomplishment that you got from the military some of the time, and you want to find more of that. Well, that's where you go and figure out some other way to do that. I've found that way by writing about military topics and answering questions from military readers. Other ways to do that are volunteering, finding somebody else to take care of if that's your family, or if that's your community, or figuring out something that gives you the sense of pleasure, the sense of accomplishment, fulfillment by going out there and doing something completely different that gives you the same feelings. As a nuclear engineer, I'm a little skeptical of this, but I've been told that I tend to be hyper competitive and a little overachieving. When you reach FI, you can back off. And if you're that kind of personality, an even bigger challenge is becoming less hyper competitive and less overachieving. And it's difficult. I've been FI almost as long as I was struggling toward FI, and I'm still struggling toward that backing off and not working so hard and not grabbing for every dollar bill that floats by. when you are FI, when you've gotten past the point where you're FI and you're no longer scrambling for every dollar, one day you'll wake up and you realize that it is actually raining money out there. And it is tempting to grab a bushel basket and go out there and get your share again. But when you're pushing yourself toward FI and you realize that the retirement calculators are giving you an 80, a 90%, a 95% chance of success, as human beings, we tend to focus on the 20%, 10%, 5% chance of failure. However, that 80% chance of success is about statistically about as reasonable a success rate as you can get. It also means that 8 out of 10 times you're going to have way more money than you need. So one more theme to watch out for in financial independence is the potential burden of stewardship. You get to financial independence with what you think is enough money. 8 out of 10 times it's going to turn out to be more than enough. A couple of those times it's going to turn out to be way more than enough.
Thanks. Good question.
I'm Jonathan from Portland. Pete, you were recently profiled in the New Yorker, which is an experience that not very many people have had. And I'm a big fan of the New Yorker, have been for a long time. And to me, it seemed like that was a kind of a major development in terms of people's awareness of your blog and, you know, the whole movement, I guess. And I'm just curious, you know, with an interest in publishing and media, what that experience was like, if there were any surprises in terms of how the piece turned out, and some of the ripple effects that, of having been kind of profiled in such a mainstream publication.
Okay, well, I would not. It's definitely not as good as it sounds. There's nothing special about any kind of media profile. It's basically not very fun. It's what I learned for any type of interview. Like I had the first big one that I really lucked into was like right near the beginning of the blog. It was in the Washington Post, and everyone's like, "Oh wow, the Washington Post is huge," and I didn't even know it. But that brought a lot of people to the blog, so that's what I realized is the benefit to me. So every time you do an interview of this type of thing, it's like a negative experience for you because you get a lot of like negative criticism, very little positive reinforcement comes with it. It's usually pretty dull, repetitive questions you have to answer. So the only reason you should do it is not for personal vanity. It's as if you have a reason for attention to be called to your cause. So in this case, I wanted more people to read blogs. That's why I do any of these, or my blog and the related blogs that I support. That's the only reason I do these interviews. And the New Yorker was surprisingly small effect. It was, you think of it as a giant magazine because your parents read it when you were a kid and everybody else read it, but it only had like a small temporary boost to the blog's traffic, partly because there were no direct links in it on their online thing. That's a really key thing is people have to be able to click and get there. So much bigger. Other interviews were actually much bigger than that one. And then the final comment I would have is, the New Yorker is kind of a satirical, you know, highbrow, super New York-y culture thing. So they had to make fun of me, I guess. And I didn't know this was going to happen, but they were like, you know, they got a lot of details wrong and which I felt hurt the tone of like life's, you know, the lifestyle I'm trying to promote. And so I was a little bit self-conscious about that. And the whole thing was different, actually. I wanted it to be, and what I thought we agreed we were going to do, me and this writer, is describe mustachianism and what it means as like a cultural idea and how could this actually become a big thing in the U.S. culture. But instead, it was a lot about this guy named Peter Aidney who does these weird things allegedly in his town and goes down and buys pot on a Wednesday and stuff like that. And all this stuff was, I felt super irrelevant. But then, you know, that's how some of these magazines work. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. You know, personal profiles aren't a personal boon. But I did like the wheelie picture that we got to use. So that was the biggest plus of that story. Next question, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Hunter. I'm out of Seattle, Washington. And this kind of segues nice off what you were just talking about. But we tend to focus on a lot on the nuts and bolts and the tactics you guys apply to reach FI. Maybe you could say something to how having reached that or having become really close to that level where you don't need as much and you can kind of live a little less for yourself. You might, you know, be a little less this little physical body with needs and fears and stuff, and you can kind of champion these causes and
maybe even live in like a little greater state of transcendence in some ways, whether you get that in different ways in your life, which you've kind of touched on a little bit, but just curious about the sense of strength and clarity you've gotten from not having those needs and having to be so preoccupied with, just arranging your life around your basic needs. Thanks.
I'll kick off this one just to change up the order, but I think there's an incredible amount of power that you get from being able to not have to work for a living. And I am still working, so that's why I'm really focused on how I'm going to use that power after I quit. I know obviously Pete's having a huge movement and changing lots of people and, helping the environment with all these bike riders now. And that's great. And that's something, luckily the blog's taught me, is that it really does feel great to help other people and to be creative and create things and put it out in the world. And hopefully that reaches people. So I know something I'm going to want to do is a lot more of that and use the power of not worrying about the monetary reward to maybe tackle some things that other people aren't tackling because there is no monetary reward.
I would say the ability to work on long-term projects. I think to me the greatest thing has been like, I don't worry about anything on a month-to-month basis, like, cause I know that I've got this passive income that comes in that can cover all of my bills and extra, with a nice buffer. And so like the question of like supporting my cost of living just doesn't enter my mind. And so if there's something that I want to work on that I think is a worthwhile project, I can work on it, and that's amazing. But again, like the biggest barrier is me, because, this goes back to prioritizing. When anything is open and available to you, it's very hard to choose, and so you really have to focus in on like, what are my priorities? What are my values? What do I want to create in this world? What do I want that contribution to be? And sometimes it can be messy and you kind of zigzag around or try something. And, that process isn't smooth. It's not like one day you wake up and you're like, so yeah, but having the space to, like a child almost, like having that space to try stuff and finger paint a little bit is, it's, yeah. I've forgotten the original question. Now I'm just going to pass this to Doug.
But it was good. I think it was either Socrates or Plato, or maybe it was Peter Parker from Spider-Man that said that with great power comes great responsibility. And when I started writing and began writing the book, one of the hooks that I used to get the help I wanted to write the book, one of the hooks I used to make sure everybody understood that I was financially independent, was to give all the profits from my writing, all the revenue from my writing, to military charities. That way I'm not having some junior enlisted person buy my book on figuring how to achieve financial independence. Oh, by the way, you just paid me $8 and a couple of bucks of that is going to go toward prolonging my financial independence. One of the things I did after I reached FI was take some of that extra money that I had for investing. Everybody should have 10 to 15% of their investment portfolio in what's called highly aggressive, shoot the moon, testosterone poisoned investing. And in my case, like none of you have never heard that term before. In my case, I took that and devoted that towards something I'd always been curious about, was angel investing. And my impression of angel investing was you went into a room, you asked a lot of questions, you did your due diligence, you wrote some checks, you went away, you came back 18 months later, and Google was paying you $1 million. That reality is not there. The reality that surprised me was that you learned a lot more about investing by becoming an angel investor than you ever learned from reading about Wall Street or the randomness of stock markets or how to analyze a stock. So angel investing, the 8-year journey I've spent on it so far, has made me a tremendous investor. I wish I had started out being an angel investor first. That would have saved me a lot of problems in the long run. The second thing that angel investing taught me was that it's a good thing I'm doing it now. It's a good thing I'm immunizing myself about angel investing now so that when I'm 82 years old, I won't be tempted to go out and start writing checks in the hopes that I do discover the next Google. I don't think that's going to end well. I'll be able to wind down angel investing and focus on what I think are the important parts of it now while I'm at the hypothetical peak of my cognition and able to not be tempted by the unknown later on when I'm not at the peak of my cognition. The third thing that really surprised me about angel investing was how fulfilling it would be developing the relationships with the founders and the other investors. And another word for it might be angel philanthropy, because you really are giving away large sums of money. And those large sums of money are going out to create jobs. And instead of giving somebody a handout, you're giving a person who's an incredibly committed, enthusiastic, fierce, hardworking founder, giving them what they need to go out and solve tremendously ugly, gnarly, nasty society problems. And then they're going to work on that 100 hours a week and hire a bunch of people and create a bunch more jobs and use the revenue they bring in to grow the business and hire more people. You're actually pouring your money back into the American economy, into the kind of people that you really would like to help without giving them a hand up. So the angel investing has taught me a lot more about stewardship, philanthropy, charity, and investing.
You want to take us one too, or?
I had just a super short point to add. So I was always kind of cautious in my younger years, like because of my upbringing, kind of cautious family. So I was like, save your money, protect yourself, build up walls to make sure you could never possibly run out of money. And that was like, it was fun and somewhat rewarding. But then once I got to the ridiculous surplus point, like shortly after that, then I realized, well, the only logical choice is to devote your time to helping other people because you don't need to help yourself anymore. And then I realized that that's actually a much more fun way to devote your time. So in a way, being almost purely generous is the most selfish thing you can do because you're having it makes you feel much better than just, giving yourself stuff, giving yourself more security and treats and everything. So then it's like a double win because you can be like selfish by being generous for the rest of your life. So that's a great pursuit. It's like suddenly a new thing to do with money and time. So that was a big surprise for me. I didn't know that was going to happen. All right. I think we have Eric.
Hi, my name's Eric. I'm from Everett, Washington. And my question is more around, this is a great community, right? We're a bunch of like-minded individuals. I'm about 7 months into my journey, and I'm the type of person that once I find something that I really enjoy, I go all in, and I go down the rabbit hole really quickly, and then I become very evangelical and annoying about it. So how do I temper that? And how do, we go back to our circle of friends, and they may not be even aware of this, and how do I, this community and FIRE, and how do I temper that, and how do I bring them along in that journey?
You probably can't. People don't really listen to you that much in real life, I find, but you can just model the behavior and make sure you're having a good time of it. And then your curious friends, which are in the long run, the ones that are worth keeping, they are going to ask you themselves. And if they see good results, they're going to naturally want to follow it. And non-curious people, they get old after a while. So you might drift into different friendship patterns as you go further on. That's my super quick answer.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I find that you'll have friends who are very receptive and very open and who will just start asking you questions. Like, I have a friend who is right at the beginning of paying attention to her finances, and she's 36, and up to this point, she always thought that well, as long as I'm paying my bills on time, that means I'm financially responsible. And she just discovered that there's actually more to it than just that. And she's wowed by it and amazed and really open to learning. And so she I don't have to bring her along because she brings herself along. She's always asking questions. She's and her enthusiasm really rubs off on me, and it makes my afternoon more enjoyable. Because I get to re-experience that stage kind of vicariously by being with her, but I've got other friends who are money is evil. there's no talking to them because they've just got this wall where they're like, I am better than you because I never think about money because money is evil. And there's nothing you can do with that.
You're in the role of the teacher, and when the student is ready, the teacher's already there. The teacher's already been there for many, many years before the student was ready. So the people that you're wanting to perhaps persuade of the wonderful world of FI, they might not be ready yet. So the best you can do, they say that living well is the best vengeance, and living well is the best example as well. And so one day they're going to be ready, and they're going to come talk to you. In the meantime, if you want an outlet where you can feel like you're accomplishing something without waiting for people to recognize your brilliance or your wisdom, the other thing you can do is start writing. And it's as simple as posting to internet forums. Somebody asks a question on the forum and you answer it from the perspective of financial independence. That person who asked the question might not quite be on board with you yet, and the response that they'll give you will be, yeah, but this isn't working for me. It's not the right time in my life. I got too many other options, whatever the excuse it may be. However, thousands of people will be reading that same thread on that internet forum, and some of those people will be ready. You can start a blog, same purpose. Whenever I answer a reader question on the blog, most of the time that I answer a reader question on the blog, I never hear from that reader again. On the other hand, I have another couple thousand people who will read that post, and they'll be ready, and they'll respond. So it's not that you can't reach those people in an immediate circle around you as much as you are demonstrating what you're living. You're the shining example of truth in the way you live your life, and then people will gravitate toward that. You don't have to be needy for the people to follow your example and do what you want them to do. You just have to live the kind of life that you want to live and show the example you want to be, and those people will come toward you.
Great question. So we've been going about an hour. I know Pete doesn't like sitting still for longer than about 30 minutes, so he's probably getting antsy, and I'm in dire need of some vitamin D so I can see the sun is shining. So we're going to take our last few questions. So anyone else that still wants to ask something, do you want to just hop up?
Once you reached FI, how did your relationships with your personal friends, your ex-coworkers, or your family change, and what effect did that have on you?
Financial independence will separate your coworkers from your true friends. And you'll find out you have a lot of coworkers. The other thing financial independence will do is give you and your spouse and your family time to grow closer together. One early 1980s, 1990s perspective on financial independence was, what happens if everybody stops working and goes and does whatever they want to do all day? What kind of an example are we setting for the children by behaving in such an irresponsible manner? The answer to that question is the kids don't care about your work. They care about you. They want to have more time with you. As adolescents, they just want to spend time with mom and dad and play around and have a good time. As teenagers, they don't want to be seen in public with you, but they do want your car keys and your wallet. They want you to be there for them, to support them. And years later, I'm almost positive of this, years later when they're young adults on their own, they'll come back and thank you on a regular basis. And I'll let you know as soon as that happens in my case. Also, what will happen once you've reached that financial independence and you're out there living your life and waiting to find out where your coworkers and your friends are, you'll find new friends, you'll find new people that you encounter on the journey, and you'll have a good time with them. And it'll be because you have the time to reflect, the time to think about the way you want to live your life, the things you want to do with your time. People will see you enjoying life, having fun. They'll say, wow, that's somebody I want to get to know. And so again, the more you enjoy yourself as a responsible adult with financial independence, suddenly the more people will gravitate toward you and want to learn more about how you did it, and the right kind of people will be the ones that will gravitate toward you.
Yeah, I'd say it goes back to the friend thing. Some people might not even realize it. Some people are just, a lot of people don't think too hard about work, like what they themselves or others do for work and money. So at least in terms of friendships, I think some people don't even know, or it doesn't even register. And so there's no impact at all. And then the people like the friend that I just described, the one who's just discovered, the world of like money management for the first time, like those are the friendships that get enhanced. So in my experience, at least, it's either completely, as far as friendships go, it's either completely neutral because it just doesn't register for them, or it's actually a friendship enhancer because now you've done this thing that they think is really interesting and they have a lot of questions about it.
And my final thing is just echoing Nord's, which is I found family and close friends become much closer, especially the family part, because suddenly you never have to say no to stuff that you would want to do because of work. So as soon as we retired and had a kid, we started spending like the entirety of every summer in Canada back hanging around with siblings and grandparents and stuff. Whereas in the old days, if we had kept our jobs, it would have just been like 2 weeks limited. And so suddenly, and if they plan something in the middle of the winter or anything else, you can always just go up there and just have time. So it's so nice to take work away as your first priority. And that lets people you care about, I think they sense a lot more warmth coming from you because you no longer have to give your soul to the office anymore.
I think that's a good way to end this. So thank you all for, being here and asking amazing questions. Thanks to my panelists being open and honest and answering all the questions. And it's been a lot of fun. So thanks.
Finance.